get back to what we were initially talking about, like you had mentioned that you have spent a non-trivial amount of your life contributing to Bitcoin, and
Yeah.
I have been detached from that space since around 2020, since around the time NFTs came in, and there is a sense of disillusionment with respect
Yeah.
to what I thought the technology stood for and instead of what it was being shielded for. And
Yeah.
so I've kind of just disconnected, right? So I'm curious to know what has happened in that space since then. Like, are there any cool projects that we should all be aware of?
Yeah, I think so. I will say that like it sucks because the people who are heads down working on actual fundamental improvements, they don't quite like to do the be loud and try to promote everything, right? It's usually the things that would disillusion you, like the other things that are very loud and out there. And so the fundamental things don't get enough attention, I would say. um, there have been quite a lot of improvements. I mean, just to list a few, we've had the Taproot soft fork, which I thought was great in terms of, now in not so many words, it allows for multi-signature transactions to look just like a single signature on the chain and only take up that amount of space. That is pretty freaking cool in my books. I think we've also had, Lightning Network actually mature because it is a somewhat complicated protocol in order to get things right, but people have settled on things now. There are multiple good implementations. There are good wallets with good liquidity. So much, in fact, that we accept Lightning for Obscura top ups, and we've had double-digit percentage of people paying with Lightning. It actually works, and it works great. And one of the reasons why we were like, we're going to start with Lightning is because it's fast and instant, and you know how it goes instantly, right? In terms of because it settles within a few seconds, let's say within a few TCP round trips. You don't have to have a separate state in your database that's it's confirming. It's had 1 confirmations on the blockchain or 3 confirmations, it completely eliminates that. That UX is so smooth for both the user and the merchant and everything else. And it's been great. We've had other improvements like silent payments and things like that. Things that I think people are not shelling as much because they're not this is not fresh and fancy and flashy and is not going to make you rich overnight, let's say. But the ball gets pushed forward. Certainly, when you're building technology that is civilizational tech, you need to be patient. You need to ignore the noise that is out there, and you need to just keep pushing things. And I still meet up with my friends who do Bitcoin core work, and they're doing some great work, and they keep pushing it forwards.
Got it. So you mentioned Taproot, right? And in general, there have been some privacy-focused projects or privacy coins that I've also kind of just been interested in. So what is your uh, take on those projects like Monero and ZCash?
Oh, I think it's great. I don't speak for all core developers or former core developers or whatever, but I think that we need more experimentation. I think that we need because at the end of the day, right? The reason why ECDSA, let's say, what was chosen for Bitcoin was because it had decades of being attacked, basically, right? So the more the merrier. If you had multiple decades of ZK snarks out there, right? Monero ring signatures and things like that. I think it's great that we have now these live honeypots, live pinatas out there, let's say. And I think it's good that over time time will tell whether the cryptography and the architecture is good enough, and I think that's excellent. I think the more competition, the better. Yeah, and I will say that Bitcoin, by its design, is I will admit it's not the most private. It's pseudonymous, let's say, rather than anonymous in terms of its payment model and things like that. And Lightning makes it a lot better. But before the Monero people freak out on me, it's not perfect either. Okay, please don't freak out on me. I understand.
Got it. So, see, earlier you referred to Bitcoin as like civilizational tech, right, which I think it is a great way of putting it. Imperfections aside, it has pushed the world to a place where it might not have gone without it. What I would like to know is what you think will the long-term use cases be for Bitcoin?
Huh. I think that's very interesting. I think it's always going to be a you see this sort of in what's been happening so far, right? It's sort of a hedge that the common folk have against oppression in of a way, right? Because it's permissionless, because anybody can participate in the network, anybody can do whatever. It's sort of a technical problem to a social technical solution to a social problem, in that because this exists, governments and larger bodies like that will think twice before being too oppressive, let's say, with their monetary and fiscal policy, because they know that their civilians always have the option to opt for Bitcoin. Now, I would very much, that sort of always remains in a fine balance, right? In terms of some people say, Bitcoin didn't reach mass adoption, so, it's a failure of a thing, right? But certainly we get a lot of payments through Bitcoin, but also in the end, did it fail? If it was sort of the hedge that made governments do actions, made them more moderate, made the fiscal and monetary policies more sane, I think it worked pretty well. I think that's what Bitcoin is going to be, the ultimate hedge. Yeah.
Got it. And what is your take on stablecoins?
I think they're cool. It has just, I don't know. It depends on your trust model. It always depends on your trust model, right? I have a problem with anything that's bridging the physical and the digital world and claiming that it bridges the digital and physical world when there is no trustless way to bridge the digital and physical world other than proof of work. That's basically the only way we found to trustlessly bridge the digital and physical world. Okay, you say you have $500 million in the bank and it's backed by $500 million. How am I supposed to know that you have that, right? You could just be, we've had, in U.S. history, let's say, many banks that are underbacked, let's say, by actual assets and gone under. But that is not to say that any of them are. I think that, I think a lot of them are actually genuinely trying to do a good thing. But I think it's just a completely different use case than other cryptos. And I think they will have their use. And I think one of the reasons, let's say, why stablecoins have been so successful is because Bitcoin exists, as I was talking about with the hedge, right? In a world where Bitcoin doesn't exist, stablecoins would be shut down day zero. Their offices would be raided and they would be shut down. It's only because Bitcoin exists and Bitcoin can't be shut down that stablecoins are able to exist.